The thing came from the dark space between stars. It was bigger than Earth's moon and looked like someone had mixed metal with living flesh. Sharp spikes stuck out from its body like a giant sea urchin. Green lights pulsed along its surface like a heartbeat. The creature had no name that humans could speak, but it called itself Vorthak, Captain Taeho. Kim stood in the command center of Earth's space station, watching the monster on his screen. His hands shook as he held his coffee cup. 3 days ago, their best telescopes had spotted nothing. Now this thing filled half the sky. "Sir, it's sending a message," said Lieutenant Park at the communications desk. Her voice was very quiet. "Put it through," Taeho said. The voice that came through the speakers was perfect English, but it sounded wrong, like a machine trying to copy human speech. "Small creatures of the third planet. I am Vorthak, consumer of worlds. I have eaten 17 civilizations before you. You have 7 of your days to surrender your world to me. This is not a request. This is nature." Dr. Hee-Jin Park, the station's best scientist, looked up from her computer. She was not related to Lieutenant Park, but they shared the same family name. "Captain, the translation systems show it's speaking in every human language at once. Korean, English, Spanish, everything. How is that possible?" Taeho walked to the big window that looked out at space. The creature was still very far away, but it looked huge even from this distance. It said 17 civilizations. It learned our languages from other species it killed. On Earth below, every government was in panic mode. President Chen of the United Earth Alliance was on the emergency channel every hour. Military bases around the world were getting ready for war. But what could they do against something that big? Admiral Bo Young Lee's voice came through the speakers from Earth. "Taeho, we're sending up every nuclear missile we have. Target that thing before it gets closer." "Ma'am, with respect, I don't think missiles will hurt it," Taeho replied. "We have to try something." 2 hours later, Earth fired everything they had. 50 nuclear missiles flew through space toward Vorthak. The creature didn't even try to dodge them. The explosions were beautiful and terrible, like new suns being born. When the light faded, Vorthak was still there. Not even a scratch showed on its surface. A sound came from the creature. It took the humans a moment to understand what it was. Laughter. The thing was laughing at them. "Your weapons are toys," Vorthak's voice said through their radios. "Every species tries this first. Bombs, energy weapons, kinetic strikes, all the same, all useless." Dr. Hee-Jin was typing fast on her computer. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from that thing. It's not just big. It's made of technology. We don't understand." "What kind of technology?" "Both mechanical and biological. Like it's a living machine or a mechanical animal. This shouldn't be possible." Taeho watched as Vorthak moved closer to Earth. It didn't fly like a ship. It moved like it was swimming through space. Long arms reached out from its body and grabbed pieces of floating space junk. The metal disappeared into the creature's body. "It's eating our satellites," Lieutenant Park said. "Not eating," Dr. Hee-Jin corrected. "Absorbing. Look at the energy readings. Every piece of metal it takes makes it stronger." Down on Earth, people were starting to panic. News reports showed crowds running through the streets. Some people were praying. Others were fighting each other for food and supplies. The governments told everyone to stay calm, but how could anyone stay calm with a monster the size of a moon coming to eat their planet? Vorthak destroyed the International Space Station next. It didn't use weapons. One of its long arms just reached out and crushed the station like an egg. 15 people died in seconds. "This is Admiral Lee," came the voice from Earth. "All space personnel, return to Earth immediately. That's an order." But Taeho looked at his crew. Dr. Hee-Jin was still working at her computer. Lieutenant Park was recording everything Vorthak did. They weren't running away. "Sir," Dr. Hee-Jin said, "I'm detecting something strange. Every time Vorthak destroys something, it pauses for exactly 37 seconds, like it's thinking or processing data." "What does that mean?" "Maybe it's learning about us, studying how we build things, how we fight." Vorthak came closer. Now it was only 1 million kilometers from Earth. The creature was so big it blocked out stars. On the day, side of Earth, people could see it in the sky like a second sun, but dark and covered with spikes. People of Earth, Vorthak said, and this time its voice came from every radio, every TV, every phone on the planet. I have consumed the Zephyrians who could move faster than light. I have devoured the crystalline minds who could think with the power of stars. I have absorbed the void walkers who lived in space itself. You are nothing compared to them. You are animals with simple tools. Dr. Hye-Jin stood up from her computer. Captain, I think I understand something. It's not just killing these species. It's taking their knowledge, their technology, their culture, everything. So it knows how to fight like 17 different species? Worse, it knows how to think like them. Vorthak moved again, faster this time. It was heading straight for Earth. As it got closer, people on the ground could see details on its surface. Cities of metal and flesh. Weapons bigger than mountains. Eyes that glowed like stars, all looking down at the small blue planet. The creature stopped just outside Earth's atmosphere. It was close enough now that its gravity started pulling on the oceans. Tides rose higher than ever before. Earthquakes shook every continent. I will begin with your Korea Peninsula, Vorthak announced. It looks small and weak. A good place to start feeding. Your strongest warriors may try to stop me there. It will be amusing to watch them fail. Captain Taeho looked at the monster hanging above his home planet. His family lived in Seoul. His parents, his sister, his young nephew, who loved space stories. Now a real space monster was coming to eat them all. Sir, Lieutenant Park said quietly. What do we do? Taeho thought about the 17 dead civilizations. All of them probably had brave soldiers and smart scientists. All of them had families, and children and dreams. But they were all gone now, absorbed into this thing that laughed at nuclear weapons. We learn, he said finally. We watch everything it does, we record everything, and we find a way to kill it. Dr. Hye-Jin nodded. Even if we can't win, maybe we can learn something that helps the next species it finds. But as Vorthak began to descend toward Earth, none of them imagined that humanity might be different from the other 17 civilizations. None of them knew that humans had something the monster had never faced before. They were about to find out. Vorthak landed in the Yellow Sea, between Korea and China. The impact created waves as tall as buildings. The creature's massive body rose from the water like a moving mountain. Long tentacles reached out toward the Korean coast, each one thicker than a train. Lieutenant Colonel Dong-Woo Choi watched from his bunker in Seoul as the monster's arms touched land. Where they landed, the ground turned black and started dissolving. Trees, buildings, cars, everything melted into a dark liquid that flowed back toward Vorthak. All units, this is command, Dong-Woo spoke into his radio. Begin Operation Sacrifice. The name sounded terrible, but it was honest. Every soldier knew they probably wouldn't survive this mission, but they had orders that seemed crazy to everyone, except the scientists who made them. Sir, Sergeant Yu Jin called from across the bunker, the 1st Battalion is in position. Dong-Woo nodded. Through his binoculars, he could see tanks rolling toward Vorthak's tentacles. The monster probably expected the humans to attack its main body, like every other species had tried. Instead, the tanks were driving straight into the dissolving zone around its arms. The first tank lasted exactly 8 seconds before it melted. The second tank made it 11 seconds. The third tank had new armor and lasted 15 seconds. Phase 1 complete, reported Captain Minho over the radio. His voice was calm, even though he had just watched 30 of his friends die. Dissolving agent takes 8 to 15 seconds depending on armor thickness. Vorthak's laughter rumbled across the landscape. Such brave little insects. Do you think your metal shells will save you? But the tanks kept coming, not to fight but to test. Each one had different armor, different shapes, different speeds. Each one lasted a different amount of time before melting. Engineer Subin Kang sat in her laboratory under Seoul, watching data flow across her screens. Every tank that died sent back information about Vorthak's dissolving weapon. Temperature readings, Chemical analysis. Energy patterns. Got it, she whispered, then spoke louder into her microphone. Command. The dissolving field has a weakness. It takes more energy to melt moving targets, and it can't work on anything smaller than a basketball. In the space station above Earth, Dr. Hai-Jin Park was watching too. Captain Kim, look at this. Every time our forces attack, Vorthak pauses, just like before. But the pauses are getting longer. Captain Tae-Ho Kim floated next to her, looking at the data. It's confused. It expected us to attack with our best weapons first, like the other species did. But we're attacking with our worst weapons. Old tanks with weak armor, and we're not trying to hurt it. We're just poking it. Down on Earth, Professor Woo Jin Nam was in his laboratory at Seoul National University. He was supposed to be evacuated like everyone else, but he refused to leave. His computers were connected to every sensor the military had placed near Vorthak. Fascinating, he said to himself, watching energy readings spike every time the creature laughed. It's not just destroying our weapons, it's enjoying itself. The next phase of Operation Sacrifice began. Fighter jets flew toward Vorthak, but they weren't carrying bombs. They were carrying sensors and cameras. Each pilot knew they would die, but they flew as close as they could to the monster before their planes melted. Vorthak caught one jet with a smaller tentacle. Instead of dissolving it immediately, the creature seemed to study it. The pilot, Lieutenant Hae-Won, kept transmitting data even as her plane was crushed. Structure analysis complete, she reported in her final message. The tentacles have joints every 12 meters, possible weak points. Such dedication to futile research, Vorthak said, its voice now coming from speakers all over Seoul. The creature had learned to hack human communication systems. The Zephyrians also gathered data as they died. It did not save them. But Professor Woo Jin noticed something in the energy readings. When Vorthak spoke about the Zephyrians, there was a pattern, a specific frequency that appeared every time the creature mentioned its past victims. It's accessing memories, he realized. Every time it talks about the species it killed, it has to access stored data. Engineer Subin was listening to all communications. Professor, are you saying it has to think about its victories? More than that. I think it has to experience them again, like watching a recording. Meanwhile, the attacks continued. But they were getting stranger. Soldiers on motorcycles drove toward Vorthak's tentacles, not to fight but to measure exactly how close they could get before the dissolving field affected them. Drones carried mirrors and lights, testing if the creature reacted to different types of radiation. Vorthak was becoming annoyed. It had expected the humans to send their best warriors and strongest weapons. Instead, they were sending what looked like scientific experiments. Why do you waste time with these pathetic tests? The creature demanded. Send me your champions. Show me your greatest weapons. Give me a real fight. But the humans didn't listen. The next wave was even stranger. Children's toys filled with sensors were launched from catapults. Weather balloons carrying chemical detectors floated near the creature's head. Old washing machines were dropped from helicopters to test the creature's reaction to different metal alloys. Dr. Kyung-Ho Bae, a psychologist who studied warfare, was watching from a safe bunker. He had never seen anything like this. Every military textbook said you should attack an enemy's weakness with your strongest force. But the humans were doing the opposite. We're making it frustrated, he reported to Admiral Bo Young Lee. Look at the energy patterns. It's getting angry because we're not fighting the way it expects. Admiral Lee studied the battlefield reports. In 6 hours of fighting, they had lost over 200 soldiers and almost 1,000 vehicles. Normally, this would be called a disaster, but every death had taught them something new about their enemy. It thinks we're weak, she said. It thinks this is our best effort. Dr. Kyung-Ho nodded. Every other species probably attacked with everything they had right away, but we're pretending to be weaker than we are. The strangest attack came at sunset. A marching band from Seoul National University drove toward Vorthak in school buses. They set up their instruments just outside the dissolving field and started playing traditional Korean music. Vorthak was so confused it stopped moving entirely. For 5 full minutes, the creature just stared at the musicians as they played. The energy patterns Dr. Hai-Jin was monitoring went completely chaotic. Unknown behavioral pattern, Vorthak said, and for the first time it sounded uncertain. This does not match previous species' responses to threat. The band played for 20 minutes before Vorthak finally dissolved their instruments. But those 20 minutes gave the scientists more data about the creature's confusion than 6 hours of tank attacks had provided. As night fell, Vorthak settled deeper into the Yellow Sea. Its feeding tentacles continued dissolving everything they touched, but the creature seemed thoughtful. It had never encountered a species that fought this way. In her laboratory, Engineer Subin was putting together all the data they had collected. The dissolving field, the energy patterns, the weak points, the confusion responses. She was starting to see something that made her heart beat faster. "Professor Nam," she called across the lab, "what if the other 17 species were smarter than us?" "What do you mean?" "What if they were so smart they fought efficiently, logically? What if they used their best weapons and tactics right away?" Professor Wu Jin stopped typing and looked at her. "And that's why they lost?" Subin nodded. "This thing has the memories of 17 different species. It knows every logical way to fight a war, every smart strategy, every efficient tactic. But we're not fighting smart or efficient. We're fighting stupid, and it doesn't know how to deal with stupid." Above them, Captain Tae-ho Kim was receiving reports from around the world. Every nation was preparing their real armies, their actual weapons, their true strength. But they were keeping everything hidden, waiting for the right moment. The first day of the war was over. Vorthak thought it was winning easily. The humans seemed weak and disorganized. Their attacks made no sense. Their weapons were clearly primitive, but in laboratories and bunkers around the world, human scientists and engineers were working with more data about their enemy than any species had ever gathered. They had learned something the other 17 civilizations had not. Sometimes the best way to hunt a hunter is to let it think you're prey. Vorthak fell asleep that night confident in its superiority. It dreamed of the easy meal this planet would provide. It had no idea that the real war was about to begin. The second day began with something Vorthak had never experienced before. Instead of attacking at dawn like most species did, the humans waited until noon. Then they sent a single person walking toward the creature with a white flag. Captain Jiwan Yang walked across the melted ground wearing a simple military uniform. She carried no weapons except a small radio. Vorthak's sensors detected no threat from her, so it let her approach. "Great, Vorthak," she called out when she was close enough. "I am Captain Yang of the Korean Defense Force. I come to surrender." The creature's massive head turned toward her. Up close, Vorthak was even more terrifying. Its eyes were like green stars, and its mouth was full of metal teeth as long as swords. "Finally," Vorthak rumbled. "A sensible human. You have seen the futility of resistance." "Yes, mighty one. But our government has conditions for surrender." Vorthak laughed, shaking the ground. "You are in no position to make conditions, insect." "Of course not, but they told me to ask anyway. They want to know. How did you defeat the crystalline mines?" The question seemed to surprise Vorthak. "Why do you wish to know about past conquests?" "Our scientists are curious. We've never met other space civilizations. We want to learn about them before we die." This was not the kind of conversation Vorthak usually had with doomed species. Most begged for mercy or made threats. None had ever asked about its previous victories. But the creature was proud of its conquests. The crystalline minds were beings of pure thought, Vorthak said. They could calculate faster than computers and predict every possible future. But they were too logical. I simply did something random, and their predictions failed. Captain Yang nodded respectfully. "Fascinating. And the Voidwalkers? They could live in the emptiness between stars. They attacked from directions that don't exist in normal space, but they were too confident in their unique abilities. I learned to exist in those same dimensions. In bunkers around the world, Every scientist and military leader was listening to this conversation. Dr. Kyung-ho Bae was frantically taking notes. "It adapts," he said to Admiral Lee. "It learns the special ability of each species and then becomes immune to it." Admiral Lee was watching Captain Yang on the video feed. The young woman was still asking questions, keeping Vorthak talking. She's buying us time. But for what? The answer came from Engineer Subin's laboratory. She had been working all night on the data from yesterday's attacks. Now she had something that might work. "Admiral, I think I understand how Vorthak fights," she said over the radio. "It's like a video game player who has beaten the same game 17 times. It knows all the patterns." "Explain." "Every species probably had one special thing that made them dangerous. Super speed, or super strength, or super intelligence. Vorthak learned to counter each special ability. But what if we don't have just one special thing?" "What do you mean?" "What if our special ability is that we don't have a special ability? What if we're just weird?" While Subin explained her theory, Captain Yang was still talking to Vorthak. But now her questions were getting stranger. "Mighty Vorthak, can you tell me what you think of our music?" "Your music?" "Yes. The band that played for you yesterday. Did you enjoy it?" Vorthak's great head tilted slightly. "I do not understand the purpose of organized sound that serves no function." "No function? But music makes us happy. It makes us sad. It makes us want to dance or fight or cry. These are inefficient emotional responses. The crystalline minds removed such weaknesses from their consciousness." Captain Yang smiled. "But we like our inefficient emotions. They're fun." Behind Vorthak, something was happening that the creature hadn't noticed. Sergeant Insu Moon was leading a team of soldiers through the melted ruins of a nearby town. But they weren't attacking. They were decorating. The soldiers were putting up colorful banners between the broken buildings. They were painting flowers on walls. They were setting up speakers that played children's songs. "What are your warriors doing?" Vorthak demanded, finally noticing the activity. Captain Yang looked around innocently. "Oh, they're making the area pretty. We humans like pretty things. This serves no tactical purpose. No, but it makes us feel better. And when we feel better, we fight better." This was completely outside Vorthak's experience. The 17 species it had conquered were all logical. They fought with purpose and efficiency. They didn't waste time on meaningless activities during battle. Dr. Kyung-ho was watching the creature's energy readings. "It's working. Look at the confusion patterns. It's trying to understand why we're doing this." The strangest part came next. More human soldiers arrived, but instead of weapons, they carried picnic baskets. They sat down in the melted wasteland and started eating lunch. Some of them were laughing and telling jokes. Are you having a meal in the middle of a war zone?" Vorthak asked. "Well, it's lunchtime," Captain Yang said reasonably. "We get hungry. Would you like some? We have sandwiches." Vorthak was silent for a full minute. In all its centuries of conquest, no species had ever offered to share food with it during battle. "I do not consume organic matter in that manner," it finally said. "Oh, that's too bad. These are really good sandwiches." The picnic continued for an hour. Soldiers ate and joked and played card games while sitting next to a creature that could destroy planets. Some of them even took pictures with Vorthak in the background as if they were tourists. Professor Wu Jin was monitoring everything from his laboratory. "Admiral, I'm seeing something incredible in the energy readings. The creature is actually trying to calculate the tactical advantage of our picnic." "And what's it finding?" "Nothing. There is no tactical advantage. We're just having lunch, and it can't understand that." The real attack began while the soldiers were cleaning up their picnic trash, but it wasn't like any military attack in history. Captain Yang suddenly said, "Oh, I almost forgot. We brought you a present." She pulled a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. All around Vorthak, the decorated buildings lit up with bright lights. Music started playing from hidden speakers. Fireworks shot into the sky. "Surprise!" Captain Yang shouted. "It's a party." The lights weren't just pretty. Engineer Subin had designed them to flash in specific patterns based on yesterday's data. The music wasn't just noise, it was calibrated to frequencies that disrupted Vorthak's energy field. The fireworks weren't just for show. They were carrying payloads of experimental chemicals, but none of these things would have worked if used normally. Vorthak could have easily defended against lights, sounds, and chemicals. The only reason they worked was because the creature was completely confused by the idea of throwing a party during a war. "What is the purpose of this?" Vorthak demanded as the lights flashed around it. "It's fun," Captain Yang replied. "Don't you ever have fun?" For the first time since landing on Earth, Vorthak actually took damage. Not much, but enough to make it angry. Its tentacles lashed out, destroying the light displays and speakers. "Enough games," the creature roared. "Fight me properly." But the humans were already gone. While Vorthak was distracted by the party, Captain Yang and all the soldiers had disappeared into tunnels they had dug the night before. The creature was alone among the ruins, surrounded by the remains of a birthday party it had just destroyed. Dr. Haijin Park was watching from the space station. "Captain Kim, look at the energy readings. It's frustrated. Actually frustrated." Captain Taeho nodded. "In 17 conquests, it's never had to deal with enemies who fight like this. It knows how to counter superweapons and advanced technology, but how do you counter a picnic?" Down on Earth, Engineer Subin was already planning the next phase. The party attack had worked better than expected. Vorthak had taken real damage, not because the weapons were powerful, but because the creature couldn't defend against something that made no sense. "Admiral," she said to Bo-Young Lee, "I think we're ready for Phase 3. "What's Phase 3? Subin grinned. "We're going to do something so weird that even we don't understand it." That night, Vorthak tried to process what had happened. It searched through the memories of 17 conquered species, looking for anything similar to the human tactics. But there was nothing. No species had ever fought a war with parties and picnics and random acts of kindness. The creature was beginning to realize that humans were not just primitive. They were something much more dangerous. They were unpredictable. And for the first time in its long existence, Vorthak felt something it had not experienced since it was young and small, and afraid uncertainty. The third day brought something that made Vorthak's ancient consciousness tremble with disbelief. The humans were singing, not just a few humans, all of them. Every radio station on Earth was broadcasting the same song. Every television channel showed people singing together. Even the soldiers who came to attack Vorthak were humming the melody. Commander Yunsu Han stood on the deck of her warship, leading a fleet of vessels that shouldn't exist. 3 days ago, these ships had looked like ordinary fishing boats and cargo vessels, but overnight they had transformed into something else entirely. "All ships maintain formation," she commanded. "Remember, we're not here to fight. We're here to dance." The ships moved in patterns around Vorthak like a choreographed ballet. They spun and weaved between the creature's tentacles, never quite close enough to be caught, never far enough away to be ignored. Vorthak lashed out with its massive arms, but the ships flowed around them like water. Every movement was synchronized with the music that filled the air. It was beautiful and impossible and completely insane. "What are you doing?" Vorthak roared in frustration. "We're dancing," Commander Yonsu called back cheerfully. "Don't you know how to dance?" In his laboratory, scientist Jae-hyun Lim was watching energy readings that made no sense. The synchronized movement of the ships was somehow interfering with Vorthak's gravitational field. The creature was having trouble maintaining its position in the water. "How is this possible?" he whispered to his assistant. "I think," she replied slowly, "we're confusing its senses. It's trying to track hundreds of individual targets, but they're all moving as one." The dance continued for 2 hours. Ships spun around Vorthak like electrons around an atomic nucleus. The creature struck out again and again, but its massive tentacles were too slow to catch the dancing vessels. Finally, Vorthak roared in rage and rose fully out of the water. For the first time, humans could see its complete form. It was even more massive than they had imagined, covered in weapons and armor that looked like the technology of a dozen different species. "I have had enough of your games," the creature bellowed. "Face me in true combat." That's when Captain Sunwoo Park arrived with the land forces. But these weren't normal tanks and soldiers. They were riding elephants borrowed from Seoul Zoo. Behind them came a parade of circus performers, street musicians, and children carrying balloons. "Did someone say it's time for the real fight?" Captain Sunwoo called out. "Great! We brought clowns." The clowns were wearing military armor painted in bright colors. They drove tiny cars that were actually disguised missile launchers. They carried balloon animals that were really sophisticated drones. They performed juggling acts with grenades. Vorthak stared at the approaching circus army with something approaching panic. In all its memory banks and all the experiences of 17 conquered civilizations, there was nothing like this. "This is not war," the creature protested. "This is madness." "Why can't it be both?" asked a clown who was also Colonel Hayrin Kim in disguise. She honked a horn that fired a small rocket at Vorthak's left eye. The rocket did almost no damage, but the fact that it came from a bicycle horn completely broke Vorthak's threat assessment systems. The creature's defensive protocols were designed to identify and counter military weapons, not circus props. High above, Dr. Hyjin Park was making a discovery that changed everything. "Captain Kim, I've been analyzing the creature's structure. It's not just one organism, it's 17 different species merged together." Captain Tejo studied the data. "You mean it absorbed the other civilizations into its own body?" "More than that. Look at these patterns. Every time it encounters something new, it tries to add that capability to itself. But human behavior is so random, it can't figure out what to absorb." Down on Earth, the circus battle was reaching its peak. Clowns were firing confetti cannons filled with experimental nanobots. Acrobats were performing flips that somehow confused Vorthak's targeting systems. A man on stilts was actually a disguised mech suit that launched surprise attacks from above. But the strangest weapon was the mime. A single performer in white face paint walked up to Vorthak and began pretending to be trapped in an invisible box. The creature watched in bewilderment as the human pantomimed, pushing against walls that weren't there. "What is it doing?" Vorthak demanded. "Miming," explained Captain Sunwoo helpfully. "It's like acting, but without words." "Why?" "For art." Vorthak's consciousness reeled. Art? In the middle of a battle? What possible tactical advantage could this provide? The mime continued his performance, pretending to climb an invisible ladder. Vorthak found itself actually leaning forward to see what the human was doing, and in that moment of distraction, Engineer Subin's hidden weapon activated. All around Vorthak, the humans had been building something while the creature was focused on the circus. It looked like abstract art installations, twisted metal sculptures, colorful geometric shapes, random arrangements of mirrors and lights. But it was actually the most sophisticated weapon system Earth had ever created. "Subin to all units," came her voice over the radio. "The Confusomatic is online." The art installations came to life. Mirrors began reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at. Sculptures started spinning and playing music in mathematical sequences that created cognitive dissonance. Geometric shapes projected holograms that appeared to exist in impossible dimensions. Vorthak screamed. Not in pain, but in pure frustration. Its sensors were overloaded with information that made no sense. Every pattern recognition system it had developed over centuries of conquest was failing at once. "What is this weapon?" the creature demanded. "It's not a weapon," Subin replied over the loudspeakers. "It's modern art. Don't you like it? For 17 civilizations, Vorthak had faced logical enemies with comprehensible goals, species that wanted to survive, to protect their homes, to fight for their freedom. But humans seemed to want to confuse it to death with nonsense. Commander Yansu chose that moment to reveal her fleet's true nature. The fishing boats and cargo vessels shed their disguises, revealing sleek warships equipped with weapons that defied conventional physics. But these weren't hidden because Earth wanted to surprise Vorthak with superior technology. They were hidden because the weapons themselves made no logical sense. "Fire the friendship cannon," she ordered. A beam of pink energy shot out from her flagship and struck Vorthak directly. The creature braced for destruction but instead felt warm, happy, like it was being hugged by a star. What is this feeling? Vorthak whispered. It's love, Commander Yunsu explained. We weaponized human emotions. That was a concentrated blast of pure affection. Vorthak's war-focused mind couldn't process being attacked with kindness. Its defensive systems were designed to counter hatred, fear, and aggression. They had no protocols for dealing with love. Fire the empathy torpedoes, came the next order. More emotional weapons struck Vorthak. Suddenly, the creature could feel what humans felt. The joy of children playing, the sadness of lost pets, the excitement of birthday parties, the fear of monsters coming from space. For the first time in its existence, Vorthak understood what it felt like to be afraid of Vorthak. The creature staggered backward, overwhelmed by sensations it had never experienced. In its arrogance, it had absorbed the knowledge and technology of 17 species, but it had never bothered to understand their emotions. Why are you doing this to me? Vorthak cried out, and for the first time, its voice sounded vulnerable. Scientist Jae Hyun, watching from his laboratory, made a final discovery. Everyone look at the readings. The emotional bombardment isn't just confusing it, it's changing its brain structure. Captain Taeho leaned over the data. Changing it how? It's becoming more human. The empathy weapons are actually forcing it to develop human-like emotions. Down on the battlefield, Vorthak was experiencing its first taste of doubt. For centuries, it had been certain of its purpose, confident in its superiority. But now it was feeling things it didn't understand. Guilt for the civilizations it had destroyed, loneliness from ages of solitary existence, and strangest of all, curiosity about these impossible humans. Stop, Vorthak said quietly. Then louder, stop this attack. The humans paused, their weapons, still aimed but no longer firing. We'll stop, said Captain Sunwoo, if you answer one question. What question? Why do you want to destroy us? Vorthak considered this. In all its conquests, no species had ever asked why. They had only asked for mercy or time or a chance to fight back. But humans wanted to understand their enemy's motivation. Because it is what I do, Vorthak said finally. It is what I am. But what if you could be something else? Asked the mime, speaking for the first time. What if you could choose? The idea of choice hit Vorthak like a physical blow. Choice implied alternatives, options, the possibility that its nature wasn't fixed. For the first time in millennia, the ancient destroyer of worlds began to wonder if there might be another way to exist. And in that moment of uncertainty, the idea, humans struck with their most devastating weapon yet. They invited it to join them for dinner. The dinner invitation came from an old woman who introduced herself as Grandmother Sunja. She walked across the melted battlefield carrying a large pot of kimchi stew and wearing a flowered apron over military armor. You look hungry, dear, she said to Vorthak, as if speaking to a troubled grandchild rather than a cosmic destroyer. When did you last have a proper meal? Vorthak's massive form trembled. The question was so simple, so human, that its ancient mind struggled to process. I consume civilizations, I absorb their essence. That's not eating, that's just surviving, Grandmother Sunja said disapprovingly. No wonder you're so cranky. Sit down. Fleet Admiral Tae-ho Kim watched from his command ship as the impossible scene unfolded. A creature that had devoured 17 civilizations was being scolded by a Korean grandmother about its eating habits. Should we attack while it's distracted? Asked his aide. No, Tae-ho said quietly. I think we're about to win in a way none of us expected. Dr. Hyojin Park was monitoring Vorthak's energy levels from the space station. Captain, something incredible is happening. The creature's defensive systems are shutting down one by one. Is it dying? No, it's relaxing. The revelation had started 3 hours earlier, when engineer Su Bin made her final discovery about Vorthak's true nature. Hidden in all the data they had collected was a pattern that told a story no one had expected. Admiral Lee, Su Bin had reported, I don't think Vorthak is evil. I think it's lost. Admiral Bo Young Lee had studied the data herself. Explain. Look at the energy signatures from when it talks about the other civilizations. There's grief there. Sadness. I think it didn't want to destroy them. Then why did it? Because it didn't know how to do anything else. The truth was written in the quantum patterns of Vorthak's consciousness. Long ago it had been created by an ancient species as a weapon of last resort, but its creators had died before they could teach it any purpose beyond destruction. For millions of years it had wandered the galaxy doing the only thing it knew how to do. Each civilization it encountered tried to fight it, which only confirmed its belief that destruction was its purpose. None had ever tried to understand it, to offer it an alternative, to suggest that it could choose a different path. Until now. Grandmother Sunja set her pot down near Vorthak's massive head and began ladling out bowls of stew. "I made extra," she announced. "Everyone should eat." Soldiers emerged from their positions. Scientists came out of their bunkers. Citizens who had been evacuated returned to the battlefield. Soon, hundreds of humans were sitting around Vorthak, sharing a meal as if this were a normal family gathering. "I cannot consume your food," Vorthak said, its voice smaller than before. "Of course you can't, with that big, scary mouth," Grandmother Sunja agreed. "But you can absorb the essence of sharing, can't you? The feeling of eating together?" Vorthak hesitated, then extended one of its smaller tentacles toward the stew. Instead of dissolving the food, it gently touched the surface, absorbing not the matter but the emotion, the love and care that had gone into preparing it. The creature's eyes widened in shock. "This is warm, not temperature. Something else." "That's kindness, dear," said Grandmother Sunja. "Try some more." Professor Wu Jin was recording everything from his mobile laboratory. "Incredible. The creature is learning to absorb positive emotions instead of destroying matter. It's evolving in real time." The dinner continued as more humans joined the circle. They shared not just food, but stories. Children told Vorthak about their favorite toys. Teenagers explained video games and music. Adults talked about their jobs, their families, their dreams for the future. Captain Sunwoo Park, still in his clown makeup, sat next to one of Vorthak's massive arms. "You know, you're not as scary as you look when you're not trying to eat planets. I do not know how to be anything else," Vorthak admitted. "Sure you do. You're already doing it. You're sitting here having dinner with us instead of destroying everything." Scientist Jae-hyun Lim approached with a tablet full of data. "Vorthak, I've been studying your structure. You contain the knowledge and technology of 17 different species, right?" The creature nodded. "What if instead of using that knowledge to destroy, you used it to create? You could help us build things. Amazing things that no single species could make alone." Vorthak's massive head turned to stare at the small human. "Create? Why not? You have the architectural knowledge of the crystalline mines, the energy manipulation of the Void Walkers, the speed technology of the Zephyrians. You could help us build cities in space, explore other galaxies, maybe even find other lost creatures like yourself." The idea was so revolutionary that Vorthak's consciousness reeled. For millions of years it had defined itself by what it destroyed. The possibility of defining itself by what it created had never occurred to it. Commander Yeonsu Han spoke up from across the circle. "The question is, what do you want to do? Not what you were made to do, not what you think you have to do. What do you actually want?" Vorthak was quiet for a long time. The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the creature had ever believed about itself. It began, then stopped. "I do not remember ever being asked what I wanted." Dr. Hyejin Park's voice came over the radio from the space station. "Captain, the creature's energy signature is changing again, but this time it's becoming more complex, not simpler, like it's growing new types of consciousness." Captain Taeho smiled. "It's learning to want things." The breakthrough came when young Jimin, a 7-year-old girl who had refused to evacuate, tugged on one of Vorthak's smaller tentacles. "Mr. Monster," she said seriously, "do you want to be my friend?" Simple question from an innocent child shattered the last of Vorthak's ancient programming. For the first time in its existence, the creature experienced something it had never felt before, the desire to protect instead of destroy. "Yes," Vorthak whispered, its voice filled with wonder. "I think I would like that very much." The transformation began immediately. Vorthak's aggressive spikes retracted into its body, its weapon systems powered down. The dissolving field that had melted everything it touched faded away. Most remarkably, its size began to shrink as it compressed its massive form into something less threatening. Engineer Subin watched in amazement as her sensors detected the change. It's redistributing its mass, making itself smaller, less intimidating. "But where's all that extra matter going?" asked Professor Wu Jin. The answer became clear over the following hours. Vorthak wasn't just changing itself, it was changing the world around it. The melted areas began to restore themselves. Destroyed, buildings reformed from the molecular level up. Dead vegetation sprouted new growth. It's reversing the damage, Admiral Lee realized. Everything it destroyed, it's bringing back. But the most amazing change was in Vorthak itself. As the sun set on the fourth day, the creature that had landed as a destroyer was now sitting peacefully among humans, listening to children's stories and asking questions about human culture. "I understand now," Vorthak said, its voice no longer booming with authority but gentle with newfound wisdom. "The other 17 species tried to defeat me with their strengths, but you defeated me with something I had never encountered." "What's that?" asked Captain Sunwoo. "Choice. You showed me that I could choose to be something different, and then you chose to offer me friendship instead of demanding my destruction." Grandmother Soonja patted one of Vorthak's tentacles affectionately. "That's what humans do, dear. We're very good at making friends with dangerous things." Dr. Kyung-ho Bae, who had been studying the psychological aspects of the entire encounter, made the final observation. "You know what's interesting? We never actually defeated Vorthak in battle. We defeated the idea that it had to be our enemy." Fleet Admiral Taeho nodded. "The real final boss wasn't the alien monster. It was our own assumption that we had to destroy it." As night fell, Vorthak made its decision. Using the combined knowledge of 17 civilizations and its own newfound understanding of choice, it began to create instead of destroy. Gardens of impossible beauty grew from the scarred earth. Towers of crystal and light rose toward the stars, offering humanity technologies beyond their wildest dreams. But most importantly, Vorthak chose to stay. Not as Earth's conqueror, but as its protector and friend. It had spent millions of years as a destroyer wandering the galaxy alone. Now it wanted to spend time as a creator, surrounded by the strange, wonderful, impossible humans who had taught it the most important lesson in the universe. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. Sometimes it's helping your enemy discover they don't have to be your enemy at all. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very kind, you might even help them become your friend. Little Jimin fell asleep that night, curled up against Vorthak's warm flank, while the ancient destroyer-turned-protector hummed lullabies in the musical languages of 17 dead civilizations, keeping them alive not through conquest, but through memory and love. The war was over. The real adventure was just beginning.